channel. So as you probably saw, this is my very first video. And while I plan to do a more formal intro video at some point, I did feel strongly compelled to share this video with you all first. So today's video does share a little bit about me, my career journey, as well as some recent reflections about my experiences working in big tech. So subscribe to learn more about me, my career, and what may or may not be next for me. So before I dive in, I did want to share a little bit about my background because I do think it'll help shape a little bit more about my career journey. First and foremost, I am a first generation college graduate. And if you're not familiar with that term or not aware of what it means to be a first generation college graduate, I know most people know that when you are first gen, there's a ton of pressure. It's a ton of pressure to get it done right, to do it well, and obviously to make your friends, loved ones, and people very proud. And the way that I internalized that is that there was no room for error. I had to be successful no matter what, which meant I had to choose a major and career path that I knew I would be successful in. I needed to create a plan and commit to it. And there wasn't much time or money to explore. So during my junior year of college, a very close friend of me pulled me to a side after some leadership team meeting we had and told me that I should reconsider working in law or becoming a lawyer, and I should actually consider working in tech. And initially I was taken aback, so he obviously felt the need to kind of elaborate. And there were three key reasons why he thought that working in tech was right for me. Number one, I believed in creative problem solving, so I was willing to use my resources, find resources, partner with people to find real solutions to real complex problems. He also noticed that I had an inclination to develop systems and processes for efficiency because I believed that efficiency is what would allow people to do their best work, and we wanted to make sure we were creating frameworks, processes, order that really allowed for that. And then last but not least, one of the things that he said was very unique about me was my desire for collaborative excellence. I wanted people to be excellent as individuals, but even more excellent working together. And again, as I stood there shell shocked, trying to understand what he was trying to go with this, and he literally just said, "Hey, all I'm saying is that those things don't give me lawyer when I think about you." So again, I laughed him off and I continued down my path, my pre-law track as a political science major. So fast forward to 2017, and after working in tech for over 2 years, I vividly remember this interaction. And it came to me like a dream. And that's why I'm really excited to talk a little more about my journey actually breaking into tech and what it did for my self-esteem, but also reminded me as it related to my strength in terms of being a self-assured person. So when I finally decided to leave education, okay, wait, I know I made a big jump there, but that's a topic for another video. I had no clue what I wanted to do next. I just knew it wasn't going to be law school, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. So I allowed myself or gave myself permission to experiment and follow my interests, which is something, frankly, I never did in the past because I told myself the stakes were too high. I spent more time allowing others tell me what I was good at and what I should be doing and what they thought I'd be good at in terms of a career, but I didn't really allow myself the space to actually learn more about myself and to actually explore other opportunities. So I began to explore careers in business even after years of telling myself that I was meant to be in public service. So I started the next phase of my career initially in sales at a B2B corporate education startup. And when I reflect about this time in my life, this process of reflection, self exploration, informal and formal networking, and putting myself out there, I really was reminded of what I was capable of, which is that I can do really hard, really scary things when my heart and my mind and soul are in alignment and I'm operating with intention. So, as someone who is very fearful of taking risk, because I had a very deep fear of failure, going back to that first generation stuff we just talked about, I had to remind myself anytime that gut feeling of fear came in, anytime I wanted to take a risk, that I don't fail, I win or I learn. And I'll talk more about why I needed this kind of mantra to remind myself anytime I took a leap, especially a leap of faith, that if it felt scary, there was no need to be afraid of failure, because failure is one of life's greatest life lessons. So next I'll talk a little bit more about like the pivot to actually going into big tech and why I want to go into big tech, because I do think there was some learnings that I had. I do think it's important to share or discuss a bit about why I even wanted to work in big tech. So after working in startups of various sizes with different exit plans for about 6 years, I was incredibly antsy for a significant change. I wanted to work for a hallmark name in the industry, aka big tech. And when I reflect, so again, going back to that time, if I could go back and ask myself 10 times why I even wanted to work for a big tech company, I think I would have eventually got to an answer that it was really rooted in self doubt. I think that I told myself that I wouldn't really know if I was great at my craft unless I was at a big tech company. And I'll talk a little bit more about where I think I got that feeling from a little later on in this video. But one constant over my career and even from college is that I've always wanted a graduate or a professional degree. However, I didn't think getting an MBA would be the key or really the door that was gonna have to be required to allow me to be able to pivot into a big tech company, especially given that I wasn't changing functions, I wasn't changing roles, I wasn't changing industry, I wasn't even changing commerce type or even the market. I, at the time, was already working in a B2B social media tech company and planned on doing the exact same work, just at a larger company. And a quick reflection is that that should have been a flag for me, like a flag on the play. While I value my MBA experience because it truly gave me lifelong friends, I built some really great connections. I had the opportunities to do things that I wasn't able to do in undergrad, and it really cemented my leadership development. However, it should have given me some pause that an institution required an MBA for me, like wouldn't consider me any other way. Despite my years of experience doing the same job, the same industry, with the same customers, the same tech acumen, the same quality of product, etc., in order for me to even be considered a viable candidate. So, fast forward to how I actually landed my first opportunity in big tech. I leveraged my own personal relationships. So these relationships I already had in existence prior to going to business school. And I was able to secure a referral for an MBA internship at a global tech company. Upon entering my internship, I was really confident that I was going to perform well and be an exceptional candidate for a full-time employment. I wasn't interested in just going somewhere for just three months in the summer between my first and second year just to have an internship. I wasn't interested in going to a company that I couldn't consider myself being at longer term. So I did just that. I really invested in my internship search and my network, and to make sure that I really found an opportunity that could be something I could see myself in, in the short term and even longer after business school. So I really leaned into my alumni network at the company once I was there to find additional opportunities to support other parts of the business. And I actually found a company initiative that was an entirely different business group during my internship. So on top of my actual internship, project, teams, the work that I need to do, I found an additional project in another area of the business. And long story short, I did well on both sides, on both projects, both initiatives. And I knew that I would be a great asset to this company. And I was so happy that many other people saw it too. So you're probably wondering, like, what changed? And frankly, a lot changed in a pretty short period of time. So, because a lot of the legwork that I did, I would say in business school, during my internship search, all of the great work I did during my internship, I thought, the process to getting to full time would be a pretty smooth transition. But instead, it was everything but that. And while there were definitely industry swings and changes in terms of company priorities, I was misled about the role, the product, as well as compensation, despite advocating for myself. And I'll probably share more about what advocating for myself looked like in this process, but I want to keep, this video in a relatively shorter time frame. And while reorganizations, companies change priorities all the time, especially in large organizations, it doesn't change the fact that I was affected disproportionately. Full stop. And here are some examples of that. So I was at the company full time for less than 6 months, and I was already reassigned to 2 teams, and I had 3 managers, which at this company, managers, your team, the people you work with in such a cross-functional role are mission critical for your performance evaluations, which I'll talk more about how important performance evaluations are in this company later on in the video. I had to transition key business projects, meaning I had high visibility, high leadership buy-in. I was the core driver of it, meaning I was the one that developed the strategy, came up with the approach, got the people on board, did all of the things, leading without formal authority, just to hand over these projects to other people every time I change teams, which means that they essentially get to land or get the credit, the final output, the final credit towards work that I did the groundwork for. So I didn't even get the opportunity to execute against the strategies and the programs that I built, which is a whole other thing that I learned about myself. I believe in being able to do 0 to 1, and that's really important to me. And then this might seem small, but I do think it's important to call out, and that's why knowing yourself is so important. I was no longer working on products that I cared about, which I know seems small, but for my role, one of my biggest superpowers in that role was my ability to develop empathy and understanding for the intended audience and the core user of said product, which made me great at my job. So that did have a trickle down impact on my performance and how I felt in this culture overall. So one thing I do want to share with you all as I reflect on this is I am not new to change. I am not hesitant to change. Fun fact, I'm actually a former military brat or dependent, and I can handle change and disruption well. That is something that I can do. I thrive in change and ambiguity. But what I struggled with was the repeated loss of autonomy and just being expected to just be okay with it. And that was difficult and challenging for me to deal with in the culture that I was a part of and in. So I'll talk more about that shortly. So one of the things that I do think is important is to also talk about kind of like the cultural impact of a lot of the tech landscape changes inside of a global big tech company. So in 2022 and 2023, the tech landscape changed for many reasons, from mass layoffs to the race to AI and innovation and more. But one thing that kept the industry swaying back and forth was how the stock market was rewarding these companies with rising stock prices. And as an employee in one of those companies during that time, it was genuinely unsettling. Not only was I battling survivor's remorse as seeing so many peers and people that I respected being laid off at high rates, not even having the opportunity to say goodbye, getting each other's contact information, which is a whole other thing, offboarding from one team to then have to onboard into another at the same time. Again, the work doesn't disappear, right? And then adding on adapting to new management. So you have a new manager, it's kind of like interviewing all over again. But this piece was probably the most difficult piece for me, given I have been very fortunate that I've worked in companies that invest in culture and really invest in creating a culture that is supportive of teamwork and collaboration. But I was dealing with cultural changes where my peers, right, people on my current team, previous teams, former managers who were now becoming senior individual contributors or being flattened just due to the organizational changes that were happening across the company, were now seeing me as a competitor, competitor, but now also seeing me as a competitor in a volatile work environment and job market where there is little to no job security. So a culture that once encouraged collaboration, solving hard problems, complex problems, and really leaning on people to do it and doing it collaboratively now became a breeding ground for infighting, abuse of authority and power, and frankly, mistrust. And I struggled to make sense of it, right? Like it was almost kind of like a flip switch. and it made me physically ill. I couldn't sleep. I was incredibly anxious, and it negatively impacted my personal relationships, so even outside of work. And for the first time in my life, I felt trapped. And I don't use that word lightly. I literally felt like, what do I do in this situation? Not only at a micro level in this company, on this team, but also at macro, at a industry level and a global level. And when I think about my reflection earlier, where I talk about, like, I really thought I needed to have this hallmark big tech experience on my resume as a part of my broader career journey. I reflect back on what actually made me feel that way. And in my opinion, global tech companies intentionally build hiring processes and organizational cultures that attract, bring in, and motivate extremely exceptionally talented, high achieving, and motivated people. So there's obviously like a social signal or a signal to recruiters, to other companies, to other opportunities, that when you work for any of these big companies, that indicates something about your reputation or about your potentiality to deliver some type of skill or expertise. And employer branding is a huge part of that, right? Like, there's a lot that goes into it. But I just want to say that there's definitely an ideal candidate profile at these companies and the type of personality and character type that they're looking for to work in a lot of these roles. And again, I know that this is not unique to the tech industry, but the company culture did have a unique way of getting these brilliant people to self-identify and connect their self-worth to their work output and the company's overall performance. So, hence the unpredictability of the tech industry and the labor market that started in 2021 only amplified those company organizational challenges, the cultural challenges that I mentioned earlier. And another key reflection of this is that, like, as an underrepresented person in this company and one of very, very few in my respected role and business division, the impact of these changes on my experience was magnified. And I knew it from my limited interactions with leadership very, very early on, inconsistent support from the various managers that I had, and how some of my peers would actually try to manipulate me into making decisions that would benefit their careers over mine. So again, I just say that there are some cultural and organizational tenets that I do think amplified what was already happening at an industry-wide landscape. So thanks for hanging in there. I'm about to wrap up this video. But before I do, you probably can tell throughout the conversation that I shared with you all today that I am a very reflective person. You can probably go back and make a little game out of counting how many times I say reflect or reflection. But to wrap up this video, while my journey to big tech was challenging, I am so grateful for the resilience that I have gained, the deepened self-awareness that I now have, and my supportive community. I knew my community was supportive before, but during this period of my life, they really have shown up and shown out, and I'm so grateful for them. And while big tech could have broken me, it certainly did not, and I'm so grateful to be able to say that. And as you get to know me, you'll learn that I am a very reflective person in any situation or in any life experience. I believe that there's always a lesson to be learned. So I do want to share a few learnings from my journey to big tech. The first one is prioritize time and space for truly knowing yourself and what you need to be successful. And this will be true in life, career, relationships, and everywhere in between. So, of course, you're going to change over time with more experiences, but it's essential to know what is true to you, your soul, and essence, and should remain consistent, but also acknowledge that it might show up a little bit differently at different stages of your life. So, for example, while I may have struggled, younger stages in my life with ambiguity and change, as I got older, I actually got to see the beauty in it and how it made me a stronger professional, how it made me a better student, how it made me help me build relationships with people across differences. And I know that it shows up differently in my life. But that is consistent with me. What I do value and what I do need is autonomy. And that's something that I've learned with myself throughout life and through changes. So if you don't do this already, I strongly recommend having some type of reflection practice if you don't already have one. That can be journaling, that can be letters to yourself, videos to self. Keep it simple, but make it something that you can commit to and remain to on some type of consistent basis. I find that reflecting monthly works better for me versus weekly, but it's something that you have to experiment with and develop so that you are always making sure you're setting aside time to know yourself and to really know what you need. The second thing is pay very close attention to what a company or an industry tells you they value and believe it. This is a tough one for me, but to see it as like a corporate view on it, it's kind of the quote where it says, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You know, the first time piece maybe in parentheses, but when a company shows you what they value, and there's a lot of signals online, and there's a lot of information that you can use to figure those things out, you should formulate your own POV or perspective on it and believe it. We do live in a capitalistic society, so I do acknowledge that there's no such thing as a perfect job or perfect career. And it would be really foolish and naive to think that a company should put their employees first. But we do live in a capitalistic society. So one of the things that I learned in business school that I'm going to share with you all, because I do think it was core to helping me think differently about my career journey, is that it is literally the judicial, financial, legal responsibility of a company's leadership team to maximize value or earnings for its shareholders. So that means when companies make decisions, that's who they're thinking about. Their shareholders, the people who own stock in the company. And yes, some employees, or in most companies, employees do own some portion of the company, but they're thinking about the major shareholders, the people who own hundreds and hundreds of shares of that company. So you as an employee, yes, you are important because you help the company execute against its vision, its goals, all of those things. But you have to frame it and remind yourself that the company is always going to do what is their number one priority, which is maximizing earnings for its shareholders. And there will be trade-offs in those decisions on a very regular basis. So the sooner you accept that truth, and then you will be able to choose and move accordingly with that information. And I think that's the piece that is important, right? Like, at the end of the day, you are there as a part of a labor contract. And the sooner you acknowledge what the company is really there to do and what you're there to do, you can set those boundaries and create what you need to make the decisions that you need for yourself and for your family and for your community. And this is my last learning, which is never compromise your why or your values. It'll never be worth it. So going back to knowing yourself, a core piece of knowing yourself is knowing why you exist and what you believe in. So without knowing these things personally, it is so easy to be led astray or misinformed or confused. So since no career again or company is perfect, you must know your threshold. And what I mean by threshold is how much you're willing to take, at what cost, and the limit. Your non-negotiables, kind of like dating, like what you can't put up with, you won't tolerate. What you can give. I do believe that in society we should be able to give as well as to receive. So you should know, what are you willing to give, right? What do you have? What are the talents, skills, knowledge that you want to share in that environment, in those spaces? And what are you there to gain as well? Because you should be gaining in that experience as well. But define these things first. Like, before you enter the company, know these things first. And again, like I said, while trade-offs will be inevitable at different points in your life, at different stages, different priorities, there might be some changes and trade-offs that are made, but you should never, ever compromise on the things that you know you're not okay with, whether that is your values, your belief system, whatever that may be, and you need to know those things up front. So that is it. I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. Since this is my very first video, I did want to share what you can expect more on my channel. So Subscribe if you'd like to learn more about business, career, personal growth, or just like random thoughts from me. I love to read, so I kind of share reflections of books that I'm reading. But thanks